4 o'clock. Now, think back to when you were 13. What was your biggest worry? For many, it would be whether our favourite band would make number one, or for others, it might be whether our crush at school liked us back. Well, today, the biggest worry for those aged 13 in London is the ability to afford new clothes, afford food and new clothes, according to new data. Now, children as young as 13-year-olds think that they will have to leave the area where they live in order for things to change. Kaylee Wainwright is Director of UK Youth and joins me now. Kaylee, thank you so much for joining us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi, thank you for having me.
So tell us a bit about this research, because it sounds incredibly worrying.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? The research was undertaken by the Co-op, and they found that for 10-year-olds, the biggest worry for them currently is the cost of living crisis. And I personally, I think we need to all be asking ourselves, like, is that okay? And actually, no, it actually probably isn't. And we need to be doing something that's going to make sure that we can, help young people to navigate through this and not have this burden on their shoulders.
And I mean, what are the sort of questions that were asked for it to be revealed in this way? Because the idea that a 13-year-old is worried about the cost of living, that's the reality of how they are living at home right now, which of course comes from the anxiety that potentially their parents are also carrying.
Yeah, absolutely. And the question was around, what is your biggest worry? And this was the biggest thing that came out. And I think for me, there's two things that really stand out there. Through our work at UK Youth as well, we're seeing young people are now facing with more information and access to media and news than they ever have before. When I look back to when I was 10, I think I saw the headlines in the paper shop on the corner, maybe in the news on the background when I was eating my tea, and now it's accessible for everyone from the minute they wake up to when they go to sleep, and every second of the day. So I think that's a bit of information overload. That information isn't always accurate, and we know that young people are often portrayed and receive news in a negative way in the media. So I think that's a lot for them to be contending with. And I think the other side of that is that for young people, the reality is that a lot of them are living in poverty. They're seeing their parents accessing food banks and worrying about how to put food on the table, whether they should heat their home, whether they should feed people in their house. The rising cost of energy is really worrying for a lot of families at the moment. And if you're a young person, you're probably sat there thinking, well, how am I? What does the future for me look like? And, I think that's something that we should be really concerned about in terms of the long-term impacts on their mental health with this.
And talking about mental health, what factor does loneliness play in this?
I think loneliness plays a really big factor. I think, as a result of COVID, we know that young people have been the hardest hit demographic by COVID. There's been a big disruption to education, and a big impact on mental health. We saw that, through our work at UK Youth with the local youth organisations, they're telling us that more young people are facing social anxiety and feeling isolated and lonely and struggling quite a lot to sort of get back into some kind of normality, whatever that might look like for people. And the research from Co-op also showed that actually young people are now more likely to move away from their hometown in order to find good jobs or work. And so if you think about how, young people go into new places that are away from home, they're more likely to feel isolated and lonely, in that respect as well. So it's something that we should be thinking a lot about and thinking about what are the solutions to some of these things.
And what is to be done? I mean, are there suggestions afoot as to how to combat so many of these issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very complex, isn't it? And I think there could be you could see a lot of people thinking, well, how do we tackle this, and is it too hard? I think for us, we think there's something about how do we create space for young people to be part of the conversation on solutions. Obviously, there's research being done all the time, and so young people, we are seeing the stats from this research and others that it is affecting young people, but how can we involve them in discussions around policy change, and how can they be involved in creating some of the solutions? The research showed that 3/4 of young people want to make a difference in their local community. Like, that's amazing. Like, considering everything that young people are going through, they're still, being resilient, and they're still really passionate about wanting to make the world a better place. So how can we involve them in that? How can we unlock more volunteering, social action, work experience opportunities where they live? We know that young people who are accessing youth work support and volunteering opportunities feel more connected to their community. And if they feel like that, then they're more likely to, want to stay in the community that they live. So I think that's one thing. We know there needs to be more investment and support in youth work and frontline services. Considering everything that's happening with young people at the moment, they need access to that, to process and to develop the skills, and also have access to fun opportunities that help them to connect with the people where they live and maybe from other areas, and to have some fun and just to rebuild those connections after a couple of years of difficulties, with the pandemic. And I think finally the third thing is we need a better strategy for joined up services locally and nationally, between business, government, youth services, education, health, to really look at how we develop different ways of working to unlock the opportunities for young people, especially in terms of career pathways.
Oh, Kaylee, thank you very much. We'll keep an eye on that story and see as it develops. Kaylee Wainwright, who's the Director of UK Youth, talking about the biggest worries that 13-year-olds have, 13 upwards really, teenagers. Perhaps you have teenagers in your own home right now. You're bringing them up. What do they say are the concerns that they have? What are they particularly worried about? Does cost of living actually factor within that a tranche of anxiety? Are there other things that they are particularly concerned about? 0800 731 2